Welcome back. When I put together the video of the 54-day Rosary Novena according to the prayers of St Bartolo Longo, I promised some miraculous stories that are related to this 54-day Rosary Novena. So I want to share them with you now, and we'll begin with the saint himself, St Bartolo. The recounting of the story of the recovery of St Bartolo Longo comes from his writings, so it is said in his own words. For 7 years I had been endeavoring to spread the devotion of the Rosary among the poor peasants of Pompeii, when I was prostrated by a serious illness. This happened in July of 1879. As soon as I became aware of this dangerous state of mine, I conceived an ardent desire to give Our Lady a last proof of my love by writing a novena to the Virgin of Pompeii to obtain graces in the most desperate cases. Almost every afternoon, thoroughly exhausted by a frightful typhoid fever, I went out to pray before the miraculous picture, and there alone amidst sobs and tears, I used to read aloud one of the five prayers which I had written, and to correct it, so to say, with the help and approval of Mary. On the Feast of the Assumption in 1879, I could not possibly attend the crowning of the miraculous Madonna, as I had more serious relapse. At Val de Pompeii, everybody was entreating Mary for the preservation of my life, but there was not a slightest glimpse of hope any longer. At a last resource, and by a quite special favor, the miraculous picture of Our Lady was brought from the chapel to my bedroom. Many a time I heard my friends saying to each other, "We shall believe in the great power of the Madonna of Pompeii if Don Bartolo recovers." I then felt confident to pray to St. Catherine of Siena, and candidly told her, "My dear saint, I have written in the 15 Saturdays book. You now complain that few ask favors of you, as if the power you had when on earth was greater than what you have now in heaven. How shall my readers believe those words of mine if I, who have written them down, do not get the favor I'm asking for? And how shall men believe the miracles of Our Lady of the Rosary of Pompeii if she bids me die, who have first published them?" Mary heard my prayer. At midnight I woke quite strong and perfectly cured. The Miracle at Arpino. Anna Machui is a strong, tall, lovely young lady of 25 years. Formerly, Anna's left hand used to swell from time to time, but the physician succeeded in curing this. However, in November of 1893, the swelling reappeared, accompanying with a painful spasm. After the application of leeches, it vanished away, but then another phenomenon took place. The young lady lost all sensibility in her left leg. There was no pain whatever therein, but she could not move or bend her leg, which was just as inert as a log. Anna, now unable to stand upright, had to lay in bed. She lived in that posture for 2 months. The clever Dr. Moses Micanel of Arpino was then called in. He declared the case to be paralysis and that it would be a long medical treatment. On Christmas Day, Anna asked to be lifted from her bed and carried to the table to enjoy the merry dinner of Yule with her whole family. Whenever Anna was taken out of her bed, she felt an excessive weakness on her left side. She couldn't stand, and even hopping on her right foot was not possible. Her back looked as if it had been broken, and her whole body became crooked and deformed. Anna's father and all the members of his family were associates of the sanctuary of Pompeii. The previous year, Anna and Carolina had made a pilgrimage to the miraculous shrine and brought back with them many souvenirs. A picture of the Madonna was hanging on the wall by Anna's bed. Carolina would say her daily rosary, asking the Queen of the Holy Rosary of Pompeii to grant her friend the grace of standing upright. And every time one of Anna's sisters went to visit the picture of the great lady of Pompeii exposed in a church at Arpino, Anna would say, "Ask the Madonna to make me stand upright." Luisa, Anna's youngest sister, who was 3 years old, also had a weakness in her own legs. She would go straight to Anna's room after visiting the church and say, "I have just begged the Madonna that she may be pleased to make you stand upright and take off the pains from my legs." Anna certainly had a devotion to the Virgin of Pompeii. However, she never recited the Pompeii Novena, nor did she ever read the periodical from Pompeii, which every month records many wonders and graces received through Our Lady. Overcome with her sufferings, Anna once asked the doctor, "Tell me, may I have any hope of being cured, or shall I always remain crooked and bent?" "Little by little," answered the wise physician, shrugging his shoulders. "In better days, late in the hot season, you might get improvement by means of mineral baths, but for the present you need to be patient and resigned to your condition." In the meantime, March had now begun. On Friday the 2nd, Anna suffered much more pain than on the previous days. And the night was about 2:30 a.m. Anna saw, as a dream, a nun, like one who kneels at the left side of the bed of Our Lady of Pompeii in the picture. She is St. Catherine of Siena. The nun drew near the bed of the patient and began comforting her, saying, "You shall walk upright." At these words, Anna awoke feeling both a hope and fear. She immediately called out to her friend. "Carolina," she said, "I dreamed of a nun, like the one who kneels at the right side of the Madonna of Pompeii. She told me that I would walk upright." "Did she tell you anything else?" asked Carolina. "Yes, many more things, but this part I remember well." Anna was in a terrible state of agitation. She wanted these words to be true, yet she feared it all might be an illusion or a dream. "If I rise and cannot stand upright," she thought, "what will become of me? I will grieve and suffer evermore." 2 hours passed in that state of anguish and sleeplessness. Then at 4:30 she finally fell asleep again. Behold, it was then that she felt like she was in a church at the altar of Our Lady of Pompeii. She was kneeling down in sobs and tears. Suddenly she felt a touch of a hand on her left shoulder. Looking back, she recognized the same Dominican nun who she had seen 2 hours before in the vision. "Courage, courage," said St. Catherine. "No sickness ever turns to evil. Let us recite the novena to the Blessed Virgin." Then taking the booklet, the nun began reading, "O Immaculate Virgin and Queen of the Holy Rosary, in these days of dying faith and triumphant impiety, thou hast established thy throne as Queen and Mother in the ancient land of Pompeii." Anna was following word by word the prayers read aloud by St. Catherine. When they came to the words, "Thou did once promise, St. Dominic, that whoever wants graces will obtain them through thy rosary. Behold, I, with thy rosary in hand, call upon thee, O Mother, for the fulfillment of thy maternal promises." Then the saint stopped and said to Anna, "Repeat those words twice." Anna obeyed. After reading the 5 prayers of the novena of petition, St. Catherine said, "Stand upright. You are perfectly cured." And immediately she added with a sweet voice, "Will you not come to Pompeii?" "Why not?" asked the astounded girl. "And when shall you come?" "When I can," candidly replied Anna, thinking of her helpless state. At that moment she awoke. Anna remembered all that had just happened, and yet she still doubted the reality of the vision. In her anguish she thought, "If I now get up and walk and am not cured, what shall be my sorrow?" However, she began to feel that it was not a sheer illusion. Stirred by a lively hope which began to fill her heart, she decided to leave her bed. "Now I rise," she said to herself. Then, getting up, she timidly put her feet on the ground. What wonder! Both of her legs are strong and upright, as though she had never suffered. Anna then puts her slippers on and starts moving about. Anna reasons no more, but questioning the very evidence of the fact, she doubts her own self. Such is a person in the presence of a supernatural event. She feels small and feeble, for she realizes, in some manner, the infinite distance between the Almighty and the creature. Perhaps the slippers prevent me from feeling the pain, thinks Anna to herself. She's still wearing them, and as she throws off her slippers and walks about bare feet, she realizes the miracle is palpable. The great Queen of the Rosary of Pompeii has granted the grace. Under the oppression of a boundless joy, the young lady falls down and kisses the ground amidst the abundant tears and feelings of gratitude towards her benefactress. After this first burst of joy, she gets up and runs to Carolina, who is sleeping soundly. Anna shakes her awake and says, "Dear, see, I stand upright. I walk. I am cured." "Is it possible? I don't believe you," answered Carolina, as she ascertains if her friend is all right. "Anna," she says, "put on your clothes and then move." Anna dresses herself with great ease and then walks freely around the room. Carolina immediately thinks of returning thanks to Our Lady and St. Catherine, who kneels at her side on the miraculous image. "Anna, we must go to Valle de Pompeii." "Yes," agrees Anna. "Let us start tomorrow." "We will ask St Bartolo Longo to publish the miracle," says Carolina. "We will bring him all the testimonies about your cure. The first one we need is a written testimony from your physician." The doctor is then called, and suspecting another crisis, he hastens to Anna's room, and then, seeing her with great astonishment, the bed empty, and hearing from Carolina the account of what had happened during the night, the doctor was very wise and prudent. He laughed when he heard the account. "It would be a miracle," he said. "I told you before, to get Anna cured she needs time and patience until the end of her treatment." "But we have a miracle," exclaimed Carolina. At those words, Anna entered the room, walking with ease, standing perfectly straight, and sounding cheerful. The doctor was cut to the heart and could not believe his eyes. He asked all the particulars of the miraculous events. Then he was given a full account of the cure when requested. "Doctor, you must write down a testimony of all of this." "I am ready to do so," replied the doctor. "Tomorrow Anna and I will start for the Valley of Pompeii," explained Carolina. "No," the doctor said. "Since the saint told you to make the novena of Our Lady of Pompeii at home, you must first finish it at home and then go to the shrine. In the meantime, I will get the testimony ready." All of this was done accordingly. On Palm Sunday, 1894, the two pilgrims were seen in the Basilica of Pompeii, shedding tears of gratitude before the miraculous picture of the Queen of the Rosary, at whose feet kneels the seraphic St. Catherine. In the evening, both Anna and Carolina put on the white scapular and were enrolled in the Third Order of St. Dominic, receiving respectively the religious names of St. Catherine of Siena and Rose of Lima. The Miracle at Lacedonia. Michael Balestrevi is a just and pious man from Lacedonia. He is the owner of many horses, being the director of the mail service. He married an excellent and devout woman, Grace Lombardi. She bore him 5 children, the last of which was a baby girl named Mary Antonietta. When Antonietta was 3 years of age, her mother died, and her father decided to marry again. His choice could not have befallen on a better person than the sister of his deceased wife, Raffaella Lombardi. Raffaella was a woman of uncommon piety and exemplary charity towards her neighbor. Michael hoped that their aunt would continue to educate his children with the maternal tenderness of that of her sister. They had been deprived of a mother at such an early age, and Raffaella fully lived up to the hopeful expectations of Michael. Michael never allowed his young daughter to visit any other homes except his own. Antonietta grew up amidst domestic walls like a tender flower, jealously tended by a careful gardener. In this innocent and singular school, she learned a science unknown to the world, the science of simplicity, being so dear to God. In the first days of August in 1887, Raffaella received a letter from Naples. On opening it, she discovered a small picture of the Madonna, bearing the title, "The Blessed Virgin of the Rosary of Pompeii." She looked at the signature, Angelina Bruni. This was her old friend, who for 16 years had never written her. With aroused curiosity, she hastily perused the letter, and after having read the letter, Raffaella immediately became an associate and was the first person at Lacedonia to spread devotion to the Virgin of Pompeii. Among the first to inscribe herself as an associate was Raffaella's stepdaughter, Antonietta. In November of 1887, Antonietta completed her 17th year. Tall and with black eyes, of a delicate build, she bore on her features the expression of intelligence joined with a certain childlike frankness and simplicity. The Easter of the year 1888 fell on the 1st of April. This time of Paschal festivities that bring with it so much brightness and joy were for Antonietta the beginning of days of suffering and pain. On Easter Sunday, she was attacked by pneumonia. The customary remedies were given to her, but in vain, and the sickness grew. An obstinate fever and cough that made her expel blood led people to believe her to possibly have tuberculosis. After a month and a half of continual fever, it was decided to send her to the country to breathe pure air. To reach the cottage, it was necessary to place Antonietta on a donkey, and then 2 persons had to support her on each side. During her first 4 days in the open air, an immediate change for the better occurred, which aroused new hope. But then the fevers returned and redoubled in intensity, accompanied by more inflammation and pains to the joints. These caused the girl's limbs to be drawn up. The family doctor was called and came to visit Antonietta. Upon seeing her, he ordered an immediate return to town. But now she was no longer able to mount a donkey, and so it was necessary to carry her in an armchair down the road, where she was placed in a carriage and taken home. Once home, her whole body was attacked by pains of the joints. The doctors diagnosed it as general inflammatory rheumatism. Not a hand could touch her without her causing more pain and suffering. Her whole physique had undergone a complete change. Antonietta was obliged to complete and abandoned and to stay in bed where she was unable to move. In order to change her position from time to time and make her bed at least every 8 days, she had to depend on the strong arms of others. At last she completely lost every power of motion, and she became paralytic and deformed. The pain in her spine obliged her to remain bent over her stomach without being able to sit, while both her legs shot up with pains and were drawn up. Antonietta's arms were always pressed to her bosom and no longer opened, and her fists were closed by reason of continual suffering. Her fists were so tightly clenched that the fingernails gradually cut into her palms, making deep incisions. Antonietta was a pitiful sight to behold. Her arms rested on her contracted knees, and clenched fists touched her chin. Besides the cut on her hands, she had 3 sores produced by the medical devices which had in the beginning been applied to her shoulders. 2 of these sores eventually healed. However, a 3rd sore, which was further down on her back, was always rebellious to balsams and lotions, so it remained open and bleeding. If the poor girl was tortured by her paralyzed members, which suffered in her stomach and bowels were also suffering, it seemed as if she had a stomach that was burning and on fire, that consumed both it and her bowels. All food was repellent to her. No sooner did she swallow a morsel of food than she would immediately throw it up. In order to keep alive, it was necessary for her to put a spoon of water to her lips, and some beaten yellow of egg, or a shred of meat, which someone else had to do because she could not feed herself. In that poor body, which appeared to be an instrument of torture, the head gave a crowning touch. A facial paralysis also was contracted on the right cheek, and she couldn't eat. Her mouth and right cheek were drawn down. Her right eye had become smaller and was so sunken in, it was almost repellent to look upon her. More often, the light irritated her so deeply that she preferred to remain in the dark. Her doctor had done all that he could for her. As a family physician, he continued to visit her 3 times a day, but he no longer prescribed any remedies, and he declared her as being incurable. Antonietta had an uncle who was a doctor, her mother's brother, who resided at St. Angelo. He was the doctor of the military hospital in that city and was invited to behold a medical consultant with the family doctor. He also had to admit of no hope of recovery. Such was the sorrowful impression his niece's sad state made him that he had not had the heart to see her again, and he wrote as much to her father. For 3 days the tyranny of business kept Michael absent from his daughter's deathbed, obliging him to stay at Avellino. It was there that he received a telegram from his hometown that struck him to the very heart. It was sent by the family doctor, and it read, "If you wish to see your daughter alive, come immediately. Death is near. Paralysis of the heart." Michael traveled all night to meet his daughter, hoping that she was still alive. And although he did find her alive, she was in such a state that she didn't even recognize her own father. It hardly needs to be said that during all this time, the loving stepmother, as a fervent client of the Madonna of Pompeii, never ceased to invoke the aid of her who is the Mother of Mercy. The entire family, with Michael at its lead, continued reciting the Rosary and the Novena to the Virgin of Pompeii. Raffaella, never losing hope, also wrote to Bartolo Longo, asking for prayers in a letter. They answered the prayers, and the prayers were offered immediately. The novena of petition was recited on the sanctuary by the orphan girls just at the same hour as it was being offered at home. Nevertheless, the disease remained, and all hope was given up. The doctor ordered that the last sacrament should be given to the patient and stated, "She will die of paralysis of the heart when we least expect it, for lack of food and nourishment." And so, not as to alarm the girl with the prospect of imminent death, one of her relatives had recourse to say, "The Countess has written from Pompeii that if we desire this special grace, all of us, all the family members, must confess and partake in Holy Communion, and therefore Antonietta must do the same." The good girl consented. After having received Holy Communion, Raffaella prayed with great faith, "Lady of Pompeii, I leave it to you, either to heal her or to take her immediately into paradise." Then she sent the following telegram to Bartolo Longo: "Have the orphan girls pray. My niece Antonietta is dying." Yet nothing new transpired. Antonietta's agony drew itself out in the midst of unbearable torments, and they watched her day by day, as is customary with the dying, and thus 8 long days passed. Antonietta, whose paralyzed eye hindered her from reading, could no longer bear light, but she had committed the Pompeii Rosary to memory. She also added to this prayer, "My dear lady, grant me the favor to either recover or to die." Finally, on the 28th of July, a living pallor overspread her features. Her sunken eyes appeared to be of glass. The patient hardly uttered a word. From time to time the door would open, and friends, neighbors, and relatives would enter silently, unable from refraining from weeping. They would inquire whether Antonietta was still alive. That evening, with gentle care, Raffaella and a family friend bathed the painful sores on Antonietta's back with oil of sweet almond. They applied linen ravelings to absorb the matter, and they had tried several times to free her hands so that they could cut her fingernails, which were penetrating into the bottom of the palms of her hands. But it was so exhausting to Antonietta that they desisted. Only a few hours more, the doctors explained, and she would be dead. By now, all friends had taken leave, and night had come. Raffaella, kneeling before the image of the Virgin of Pompeii, continued to pray. Antonietta, tired of life, could no longer bear to even hear a whisper or the slightest noise. She gave those of the family still around her the understanding that she wished to be alone. "What does it matter," thought the poor girl, "if they find me dead or alive in the morning?" Deep silence reigned. At 11 o'clock, Michael and Raffaella, more to satisfy the request of their daughter than the desire to rest, left her room. Sleep no longer came to give rest to Antoinetta. Alone and about to be with herself before the tribunal of God, the poor girl turned her heart to the Heavenly Mother, to the Virgin of Pompeii, help of the dying. With deep faith, as though for the last time, she began to recite the novena. Hardly had she begun the first line, O Immaculate Virgin and Queen of the Holy Rosary, and uttering the words, Have mercy on me, who am in such a need of thy help. Show thyself to me, that her dimmed eyes were struck by a brilliant light proceeding from her door to the right of her bed. Astonished and trembling, Antoinette ceases praying and beholds, amidst the splendor of light, the Mother of God, the Virgin of Pompeii, approaching her bed. Engulfed in light and surrounding Mary, the vivid vision was far from hurting her eyes. It seemed to refresh and restore them. There was a real quality to this living person, clothed with a human body like our own, different only in that it was marvelous, luminous, and beautiful. Her vestments were as white as snow, and a blue mantle covered her. On her head was a crown of white roses. Her hands were joined as though in prayer, and on the right side hung a rosary. Then, with a voice of such sweetness as can be compared to nothing on earth, she addressed these loving words to her patient. Antoinetta, do you wish to come to Pompeii? My lady, how can I do so when I am thus paralyzed and cannot even turn myself? Arise, you are well. But how am I well when I cannot move? At these words, the Blessed Virgin placed her right hand on the girl's stomach and her left hand on her back, on the spot where the sores were, and then raised the patient and seated her on the bed. She said, Behold, you are healed. My lady, I would rather die than remain deformed. No, you must not die. You must live and spread my greatness throughout. Tomorrow you will arise to go to church. You will confess and communicate, and then you will come to me to visit me at Pompeii. Before entering my sanctuary, take off your shoes and approach my altar on your knees. Whatever favor you desire, always have recourse to me, who am your mother. Then the Madonna vanished. Antoinetta was again left in the dark, but in her soul she had great consolation. She was seated on her bed in a posture in which the Virgin had placed her. Then she wished to experiment to see if she really was healed. Marvel of marvels, she immediately distended her arms and hands, openly and freely of their own accord. This done, she jumped from her bed to see whether she could walk, and she walked alone. The pains in her back, the contraction of her limbs, the ulcerations of her mouth, the spasm of her stomach, the gastric in her stomach, the paralysis of her face and eye, all of her members had disappeared in an instant. Amazed and wild with joy at such an unexpected miracle, her first thought was to call her father, but she was stopped by a childish fancy that her parents, seeing such an hour, would take her as being a ghost, and Antoinetta would be frightened. She returned to her bed and waited for someone to come. 3 o'clock struck, and Michael, still trembling with fear of a catastrophe, carefully approached his child's room, cautiously asking, Antoinetta, how are you? I feel perfectly well, his daughter answered, with a strong and sonorous voice. The Madonna of Pompeii has come. She said to me, Arise, you are well. Dear father, I wish to go to Pompeii today. She's delirious, exclaimed her father, bursting into tears. It is the delirium of death. Weeping, he goes to get his wife, saying, Go to Antoinetta, who is delirious, and pretends that the Virgin has healed her. Raffaella, who had never lost faith in Mary's intercession, is thoroughly aroused by these words. Half hoping her prayers have been granted, and half fearing an inevitable death, she tells her husband, Go, return to her, look and see if her hands open, and whether she moves her arms and limbs. If so, it will be a sign that her prayers have been heard by God. I have prayed so hard. The poor father returned to his daughter's room. "My child, you want to go to Pompeii? Show me that you can extend your arms and limbs, and then I shall take you to Pompeii." "Behold, Papa, I am well." And immediately Antonietta opened her hands, extended her arms, moved her limbs, and raised herself on the bed as if she had never been ill. With the transport of joy, not unmingled with a certain shudder of terror, Michael beheld his daughter, whom he had wept for as dead, restored to health. It seemed to him as though he were a witness to the resurrection of a dead person touched by an omnipotent hand. Every contradiction, all paralysis vanished. The skin had resumed its natural aspect. Her soft brown eyes, till then hollow and dim, shine with sweet serenity, and her whole person throbs with a new and perfect life. The miracle was evident. The inner germ of the disease had fled from the body, so long tormented by its ravages. Michael, shaken by the suddenness of the wonder, could not believe his own eyes. The seeing of so many ills disappear at once made him tremble with fear. But the evidence lay before him. He felt his blood rush to his head and sunk, swooning, to the floor. When he rose, trembling beside himself, he hastened to his wife's room, exclaiming, "Come, see, Antonietta is completely cured." At this news, Raffaella rushed to see her beloved Antonietta, but reaching the room, her surprise at what seemed such a miracle, she nearly fainted. Such a brief absence of her father, Antonietta had risen from her bed and gone into the adjoining room to get her clothes, which had been set aside long ago. She dressed herself without the aid of anyone. This was the most convincing proof that Antonietta had instantly recovered her primitive strength. Now, in the impetus of her fondness and affection, amid a flood of tears, Raffaella kisses the child to whom she has shown herself so much more than a mother over and over again. Michael, beside himself, leaves the house and goes out telling everyone he meets what has happened. He runs to the house of his brother-in-law, who, on hearing Michael's voice, deemed that he was the bearer of sad news, thinking that his daughter was dead. "Alas, I have expected this," he said, in sorrow. "But get away with you," said Michael. "Antoinette is not dead. She is alive. The Virgin of Pompeii has appeared to her and healed her. Come and see." The report soon to spread like wildfire through the town, despite the early hour. The house was crowded with people. Those who had seen the suffering period during her illness were overcome with great emotion. The morning Angelus was soon to be announced, and all the peoples had gathered and gave thanks to the great mercy of the Virgin of Pompeii, who is light amidst the darkness and life and resurrection of the dead. On the morning of the event, Raffaella had a kind idea of communicating to the lawyer Longo the glad news. She sent Bartolo Longo the following telegram: "Antonietta, risen from her bed, healed. Apparition of Our Lady of Pompeii. Offer thanks." Thank you for joining me for this beautiful journey of hearing all of the stories of healings, and there's many, many more. I've only picked 3 out of all of them to share with you today. And this is such a testimony to Our Lady of Pompeii and the power of this 54-day Rosary Novena. So I hope that you are continuing to pray with me. I know that your prayer intentions I lift up each and every day in all of the rosaries that I pray during this 54-day Rosary Novena. And I pray the blessings of Our Lady are with you and that you receive the miracle that you're looking for.